Let's look now at white blood cells. So white blood cells are also called leukocytes. They do not have hemoglobin, but they do have a nuclei and other organelles. So the white blood cells, their job is to defend against pathogens and disease, to remove toxins and waste, and to attack abnormal cells. Most white blood cells live in the connective tissue proper and live in the lymphatic organs. There's only a small number of them that are actually present in the blood at any one time. However, they will move and migrate into the blood in order to go to an area where they're needed in the body. That's how they travel. So white blood cell circulation and movements, there are 4 characteristics of white blood cells. They can migrate in and out of the bloodstream. They have amoebic movement, so they can move through the vessel walls. And they're attracted to the chemical stimuli, so they have positive chemotaxis. So a chemical that might be released might be when there is a wound and there is bacteria, or where there is an infection and there is chemicals that are being released by the bacteria. So the white blood cells will pick up on this and they'll migrate to the area. Some white blood cells have the ability to phagocyte, which means that they can engulf the waste products. So these are neutrophils, eosinophils, and monocytes. Let's look more closely at each one. So here you can see under the microscope, you've got the red blood cells next to them, and you can see that white blood cells look entirely different compared to red blood cells. And of the white blood cells, you'll need to know about these 5. So we've got the neutrophil, the eosinophil, which stains red, the basophil, which has a lot bigger grains in it, the monocyte, which has a much bigger nucleus and generally a bigger cell altogether, and then the lymphocyte, which has a much bigger nucleus compared to the rest of the cytoplasm. So let's look at the neutrophils, also called polymorphonuclear leukocytes, because they have polymorphonuclear. They have more than one nucleus. And that's between 50 to 70% of the circulating white blood cells. So these are the ones that you will see most if you were to make a blood smear. In class, you'll have an opportunity to have a look at white blood cells under the microscope. So they have pale cytoplasmic granules. So their granules are pale, and they work with, they're filled with lysosomal enzymes and bactericides, including hydrogen peroxide and superoxide. So when they migrate to an area where there are pathogens, microorganisms, they will engulf it and release these enzymes and these bactericides to kill off the microorganism. So the neutrophil action, they're very active. They're the first to attack bacteria, and they engulf and digest the pathogens. It's called degranulation. They remove the granules from the cytoplasm, and this is called defensins, and they attack the pathogen membranes. They can release prostaglandins and leukotrienes, which is important in the formation of inflammatory response, and neutrophils, when they die, they form what we know as pus, which is sort of that yellow-green or brown-green liquid, which is the death of the neutrophil. Then we have the eosinophils, which is also called acidophilus, and they stain red. And there's about 2 to 4% circulating in the white blood cells, so much less compared to neutrophils. And they attack large parasites, so these are living things like worms, and they excrete toxic compounds such as nitric oxide and cytotoxic enzymes. And they're sensitive to allergens. So they help control inflammation with enzymes that counteract the inflammatory effects of neutrophils and mast cells. So they're important in the inflammatory response. Basophils, these are the least found, so there's less than 1% of circulating white blood cells. They accumulate in the damaged tissue and they release histamine. The role of this is to dilate blood vessels so that it allows more oxygen and more nutrients to come in, and also so that we can get rid of waste products and carbon dioxide from the area that's being repaired. It also releases a drug called heparin, or a compound called heparin, which prevents blood from clotting, because it might not be ideal for the blood to clot off at that time because we're in the healing process. Monocytes are about 2 to 8% of the circulating white blood cells. These are very large and spherical. They enter the peripheral tissues and they become macrophages, and they engulf large particles and pathogens, and they secrete substances that attract immune system cells such as fibrocytes to an injured area. So they alert the rest of the body cells that we've got an injury here and you need to come and help repair it. Lymphocytes account for between 20 to 30% of the circulating white blood cells. They're larger than red blood cells and they can migrate in and out of the blood, and they live in the lymph. They're mostly living in the connective tissues and the lymphoid organs, and they're part of the body's specific defense system. You can have a test called a differential blood count, which looks at changes in the white blood cell profile, and this would be done as a routine to see if a person, if they're presenting with what looks like to be an infection. So the cardinal signs of infection would be that they have a raised temperature, that their skin is hot, they may have an area on their body that is hot, which might have an infection, and it detects changes in white blood cell population. So of course, if we have a rise in the white blood cell population, it can indicate infection, inflammation, and allergic reactions. So white cells develop, except for monocytes, they develop in the bone marrow, and monocytes develop into macrophages in the peripheral tissues.